Welcome to the Mom as Well podcast, where we are digging deep into the gifts and the gaps of foster and adoptive parenting. I'm Tara Hutton, and I'm glad you're here. Mama's Well. Yes, she is. Well, hi. I don't know if you're new to the Mom as Well podcast. I just want to invite you and say welcome. This is a place that as a foster and adoptive mom, I needed a place to talk about some of the challenges that I face as a foster parent, as a human, really, but as a parent who's parenting children who have experienced a lot of trauma and a lot of chaos. And I just, desire that community to come along and to be supportive. And I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn from people who have been there, done that, and who are doing things that I can't even imagine they're doing. And so this gives me a great opportunity to meet some really cool people. And today, my guest has over 30 years of experience in the foster care world in working with children from extreme cases, lots of chaos and vulnerability, lots of trauma. She is currently the president and CEO of Arms Wide Adoption Agency, and she serves as the president of the Texas Foster Care Association. She is active in several child welfare groups and community collaboratives, and it's evident to me that this is not just her job, but this is her life's work. This is who she is, and it really shows through. So if you would join me in welcoming DeJuana Jernigan.
Yes, you got it.
Jernigan. I know it, but I just said it wrong. Thank you for driving a long way to join me today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're here. I've known you for a while, but we've never had the conversation like we're going to have today.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people around when you're around. I would have probably cornered you a long time ago. So, DeJuana, the work that you do is obviously the work of a very compassionate heart. Mm-hmm. And I've heard you say, and I wrote it down because I liked it. Oh, that your motto is made with a mission, made for a mission. That's right. So would you tell us what that mission is and how that came to be?
So I grew up very modest means. My parents divorced when I was 2, so I was raised by my mother and my 2 older brothers, and my grandmother, my mother's mother, lived 2 blocks from us, and so both were very strong in their faith. When my mother worked overnight, I would stay with my grandmother as a very young child. And my grandmother often went to, weekly, went to prayer and Bible band on Tuesdays. And so on Tuesdays, I knew that was going to be our day for going to church. And she was engaged in all sorts of ministries, prison ministries, did lots of prayer time with and for people, and taught me very early on that, you're put on this earth for a reason. God has a purpose for your life. And so very early I learned about being a servant. And it's something that has come very natural to me as I've become an adult. It's just been a part of who I am as a person, as a professional, as being a servant and being a servant leader. And so what my mom and my grandmother taught me is that when you are engaging with people, engage with authenticity, and always try to figure out what it is that you can do to help make any situation better. Mm-hmm. And so I think from that upbringing, which was very faith-based, as an adult, I just adopted the motto of I'm made for mission, whatever that is. And I think that I've come to believe that mission is to be a child and family advocate. I have worked in child welfare all my professional life. It started in college. I changed my career, my major
Yeah.
from government because I was going to be a lawyer.
That would have been a mission too, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. But I changed it to social work. And so in one of my very last social work classes, a rep from Child Protective Services came and she said that if you can work for Child Protective Services for a year, there's no kind of social work that you wouldn't be able to do. It prepares you for anything that you want to do in the social work industry. And so I kind of took it as a challenge, you know. Yeah. If I can do this, I can be more marketable as a social worker. My mom was already upset because she said, well, if you're not going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a social worker. You're never going to make money. Be happy.
Yeah, because she'd worked so hard.
She'd worked really hard to raise 3 children on her own. And so I started out, my first job out of college was as a Child Protective Services specialist, and I did that for a few years, and then decided that I wanted to go back to school to do more and to get my master's degree in social work. And after I got my master's degree in social work, I didn't go back to Child Protective Services. I tried my hand at a few other things. Well, the passion just wasn't there. Yeah. And so I went back to Child Protective Services. And after a few years, a friend of mine said, well, hey, you know all those rules and everything that you need to do around child care, and you know, you've worked in Child Protective Services. I want to open a daycare. Why don't you come and help me do that? So I left Child Protective Services again, tried my hand at being a daycare operator. And while I loved doing the work to support the children, it was still, something was missing. So I went back to Child Protective Services. Wow. And what I learned is that my heart is in being an advocate for children who are vulnerable and who've been traumatized by abuse and neglect. Yeah. And so I stopped running, and I believe that that's my mission. I surrendered. Yeah. I surrendered and have come to accept that that's my mission in life, and that's what gives me energy, and that's what makes me happy. Yeah. And so I feel like everything that has happened in my life has led me to this very moment and into this very calling to be a child advocate.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said that I think is very powerful. And you said that your grandmother told you, and this is something you adopted, that listen for what somebody needs. Yeah. I think that's so powerful because and shows a lot of maturity. Your grandmother obviously was wise, and you've adopted that, but because I think so often we want to fix before we understand. And somebody used a phrase with my husband and I, told us one time, seek first to understand. Yes. And I love that, and that what you said reminds me of that, is because sometimes we think we know what someone needs, but we haven't really listened to what they need. I think that's powerful. And you have a very calm presence about you. Yeah. Yeah, when you walked in, I felt it instantly.
Really?
Yeah.
I get that a lot. And it's very intentional. There was obviously, growing up in a single parent household, there was a lot of chaos. And my mom was very excitable. And I always, and it would make me think as a child, it would make me think twice about how I wanted to approach her with a situation, because it's like, if I go this way.
Reactionary?
Yeah, very reactionary.
Me too.
And so, I just decided that that's not the energy that I wanted to bring in life. And over time have really just practiced breathing, and taking my time and thinking. People say, you often talk really slowly. I was like, yeah, I'm thinking about everything that I say, because I want to be conscious of what I'm saying, so that I'm not hurting people, so that my words don't hurt, and I want people to feel calm and comfortable when they're engaging with me. And so I'm very intentional about bringing a calm or having a calm aura. It's critical for me as well, because I don't want to be, I guess, reminded of the chaos from whence I came.
Yeah, you're choosing something different. And as parents, I'm not even going to say of kids from trauma. I mean, well, we've all experienced trauma.
Absolutely.
But it's definitely reactivity on my part, I could say, comes from my own developmental trauma, my own childhood, my own struggle to regulate. And so you've chosen that, which is great. It's like a therapist. You know, that's what a good therapist doesn't talk a lot, right? They ask a lot of questions.
Exactly.
They ask you, they tell you things like, oh, you know what it is. Like,
Yeah.
no, I don't. I can pay in here to tell you what to tell me or for you to tell me what I need to hear. But, wow. Well, okay. So right now, you are the president and CEO of Arms Wide. I know that was a recent transition for you. I also know, and we don't have to get into this too much, but I also know that you guys now do, for our agency, any post-adoptive work too, which is important. But I don't want to dive into that. What I want to know, I want to stay up here for a little while.
Okay.
Like in the clouds. I want to know what you see as, and I wrote some questions down because in just researching you, there was so much, and it really got me to thinking a lot this week. And like it was probably, like our interview today is going to have to be, it's going to be rich, but just prepping for you was so rich for me. And anyway, so thank you for that. Thank you for things that you said. I watched on videos, different things that made me think deeply. And so I want to invite the audience to always do that, to do what you just said your grandmother taught you, and that is seek to understand. In this episode, that's what I want to do. And I want to start with you telling me what are some of the most challenging things, and you're going to have a long list, because, you know, I said at the beginning, this show is about the gifts and the gaps. And that came, let me tell you where that came from, because you might not have heard me say this, but a friend of ours who's also was preaching one Sunday, he's our pastor, he was talking about growing up as the son of a prison warden, and his dad was the prison warden in Huntsville, the big prison in Huntsville. And so his dad didn't have a whole lot of touchy-feely kind of, he didn't have a whole lot of touchy-feely experiences with his dad. I think he said one time they never spoke at the dinner table. You know, it was just like, you eat your dinner and you get, it's very, very, very strict, and a lack maybe an emotional connection there for him. I'm filling in some things, but he said that it was a Father's Day message, and it was very good. But he was talking. His dad had passed away when he was speaking, but that his dad had left a lot of gaps for him. But it was in those gaps, navigating those gaps, that he found some real gifts. And I just loved that. And that was been probably 7 or 8 years ago that he said that, but it never left my mind. And so I relate that to foster care, and that there's so many gaps in foster care. I mean, it exists because of a huge gap. And as foster parents and advocates and, all the people surrounding this, we're charged to fill in the gap, to stand in the gap until someone else can, or whatever, all kinds of things. So that's what I say when I say the exploring the gifts and the gaps. So your experience over the past 30 years, what are you seeing now currently? You can say past, present, future, you can do all of it. I'll just let you go with that. But what do you see as some of the most challenging, some of the biggest gaps? And then, of course, we got to talk about how we're going to find some gifts in there. But start with that.
So what
do you see as some of the biggest gaps in our system today, like foster care system? Obviously, we wish that, if we had it like we wanted, you'd be out of a job.
Absolutely.
And wouldn't that be great?
Yes, it would be.
Yeah, so tell us about what is that for you?
Oh my gosh.
I know, I put you on the
spot.
spot.
Kind of a loaded question.
It is. But you can do as many as you want. We can just, or you can say ditch that one and I'll go on to my next one.
No, there are obviously lots of gaps in our system. I think the one that I have been more intimately connected with are the gaps in terms of foster parent or foster families, foster and adoptive families, particularly for children who have complex needs, children who are parts of large sibling groups, African American children, and children who have physical or mental disabilities. So I guess for the last 15 years of my career, that's where my focus has been. But I'm starting to see now, I don't know if it comes with age, I just turned 50. I'm starting to become more hyper vigilant and focused on the prevention pieces of this work. You know, what can we do to make sure that there are enough supports in communities that keep children from coming into foster care in the first place?
Yeah.
You know, so there's a gap in prevention services. And in terms of the gaps around the system itself, I think that there are just these gaping holes in terms of how foster care, the finances of foster care work, and how the system of reimbursement actually penalizes caregivers when children get better. So, you know, the way our level of care system is set up in Texas is that as children's needs increase, the reimbursement to caregivers increases. And as those needs decrease, so does that reimbursement to them.
Right.
And so, I mean, I think there's a terrible, terrible gap there in terms of how that works and how that's financed.
Okay, let me make sure I understand. So basically, we have basic needs, and you get X number of dollars per day on if your child has basic needs. But then if they have complex medical needs, you get a higher. But if your child gets well, the caregiver is going to get less money.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. Regardless of what it took to get that child to heal and to start doing better and to have better outcomes, that's not taken into consideration.
Yeah.
It's, you know, there's less, what they're looking at is, you know, there's less outbursts. You know, this child has fewer needs for therapy, or this child has fewer needs for medical care, so we're going to decrease that reimbursement. And I think that is a terrible disincentive for foster caregivers. Not that people are in the system to make money, because if you're in the system to make money, you're in the wrong place.
Yeah. Probably got the wrong person too, right?
Exactly, exactly. But most people don't do this for the money, but most people can't do it without the extra
money,
support, right? And so in thinking of gaps, the way that foster care is financed in Texas, there's some huge gaps there. I talked about the prevention piece.
Yeah, I would really like to talk about that. That's
Okay.
something that excites me.
Yeah, yeah.
In Montgomery County, we have, at least with CASA, and some a lot of people actually, we're really pushing to be more trauma informed with our law enforcement and all this. I mean, I think trauma is really at the root of all of this.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And I would say that that's a huge gap. Only recently did the state system become aware of the need to provide education about trauma-informed care. You know, I think people kind of knew what it was, but there wasn't a name for it. And I see a gap in the level of trauma competence. You know, you have some people who take an online course on trauma-informed care or read an article on trauma-informed care, and suddenly they're trauma-informed.
Well, the one on the DFPS website is it's not very good. I can do it without watching the slides. So
Yeah.
So. And then, like, if you really want to get to the root of the problem, then what about the parents who are clearly traumatized kids raising kids, and
Absolutely.
like,
And that's where you got to start.
yeah,
That's where you got to start. That's why,
as far back as we can go, right?
As far back as we can go, because we all know that the lived experiences that we have and the trauma that we've experienced becomes embedded in our DNA. And while there are ways to work through that and develop coping mechanisms and learned behavior to help you to become a functional adult in life, it still is always going to be a part of your DNA and who you are, and it's going to impact the way that you walk through life, right? And so if we are not doing the work in communities of shoring up these families before children come into foster care, and knowing that we have a shortage of resources to work with children and families once they're in the system, then the system itself is continuing to create more and more trauma and more victims of trauma. Because if children come into foster care and they age out of foster care, then what have we really done to help them? What have we really done to help their family, right? So the Family First Prevention Services Act, which was enacted in 2018, is really focused towards putting a prevention lens on the work that's done in foster care and in child welfare by allowing funds that have been historically only able to be released to states once the child entered foster care. And what FFPSA does is now let states develop programs to draw down that money when children, for prevention services for children who might be candidates for foster care. So while I think that's a move in the right direction, it's still a huge gap. And we've got a lot of work to do, especially here in Texas. And it's something that I'm really excited about.
Have you seen a documentary called All Rise for the Sake of the Children, or All Rise?
I haven't.
Yeah, I was
I'll put it on my list.
I just learned about it. I can text you the link and I'll put it in the show notes. But it's a judge in Tyler, Texas, who was a connected friend somehow to Karen Purvis.
Okay.
Decided to become trauma informed, went through training. I don't know what kind of training she went through, but then every person that entered her courtroom had to go through TBRI. She brought in therapists. She brought each parent that was involved in the suit, right? Right up to her bench. And she looked him in the eye and she cared about him. And it was beautiful. It's a beautiful documentary. I love it.
It's All Rise.
So All Rise for the Sake of the Children, or something about the children at the end. But I'll send it. But let's talk about it's so much more. We have to have funds because we have to these trainings. The people have to be paid. They have families. You know what I mean? I get the funds. But it's so much about relationship and caring. And I just didn't get that feeling, when I was walking through it with my girls, as we were moving into adoption. And, first of all, it's hard to care deeply for someone that is blatantly hurting or neglecting or just, even unintentionally harming, you know what I mean? A child, when you see the child hurting, it's very difficult. And I can understand attorneys and caseworkers and all of this being very frustrated. But when we don't have a trauma-informed lens, we see it as bad person.
Right. We see it as what's wrong with this person rather than what happened to this person, if you don't see it from a trauma-informed lens. And that's a gap. It's a huge gap because it then dictates how professionals will respond to individuals who are in the system, who are child welfare involved. And they don't respond with compassion. It becomes very punitive. And what you see is the individuals who are, and when I say the individuals, I guess in this situation, the birth families who are child welfare involved, when they don't see that they are being treated with respect and with compassion, sometimes it just causes them to lose interest or to not be motivated to do the work to try to strengthen themselves and mitigate the risk that brought their children into foster care so they can get them back. So it's, again, lots and lots of gaps. I could probably talk about gaps all day long. But there are so many opportunities.
Okay, let's shift that.
That come.
That's good.
and that's one of the things that I've been intentional about is trying to approach things from a strength-based perspective, and to just just
Ooh,
practice
I felt
positivity.
the whole energy in the room.
Did you?
Jen.
Did you?
Yeah.
Kind of lightened up, right?
Yeah,
Makes you want to
good.
shift around.
Yeah, I like that.
Shake it off.
Yeah, because quote. I
Uh-huh.
want to. This is something that I read this week. I told you it was rich for me, but Christina Feldman says, "There's not always a solution to suffering, but there's always a response."
Always.
Right?
Always.
So we're gonna shift to
Yeah.
the response.
Yeah.
And how do we respond? How can we respond? It always starts with us,
Yeah.
with me right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's always a response. I love that quote because sometimes people get focused on just solutions and not realizing what you can do to get to that place. And having a response is critical. In terms of responses, I don't think I talked about the gap in the system for African American children and the overrepresentation of African American children in our foster care system. In Harris County, African American children make up 18% of the child population, but 45% of them are removed from their families. So as children enter or get involved in the child welfare system, that proportion or that percentage increases. For example, if you've got 18% of the children who make up the total population of Harris County is 18% of their, 18% of the child population in Harris County is African American.
Okay.
32% of the reports of child abuse or neglect are African American. 36% of the reports of African American children that are investigated is 36% in Harris County. And then in Harris County, 45% of the children who are removed from their families are African American. So they start here in the population, but they represent this much of the child welfare system. That's a problem. That's a gap. There's a gap there, a huge gap there. They're 2.5 times more likely to be reported, 2.7 times more likely to be investigated, and 3.5 times more likely to be removed. So, one of the responses to that, and that it's not unique to Harris County. It's not unique to the state of Texas. It's a national problem. But one of the responses to that, after having seen that or experienced that, for the last 20, 25 years in our system, in my role at Arms Wide, we've decided to take a different approach to that. We want to do something that will help to disrupt that disproportionality. We want to engage communities around ways that they can support family members, birth families who get themselves into bad situations and poor decision making, and help to shore them up so that these children don't enter care in the first place. So you want to talk about working myself out of business?
Yeah, that's what you're doing.
That's a start.
Yeah, you're getting to you're trying to find the root there. Yeah. Sometimes I like to pull weeds, and sometimes I get way down there and I get the whole thing.
Oh, doesn't that feel good?
Oh yes. And then sometimes I just get part of it and I think,
it's gonna come back.
It looks better right now, but it's gonna come back up.
Yeah.
So you just keep digging, right?
Yeah.
You just keep digging down. So what does that look like?
So we've started an initiative called It Takes a Village. Okay. And it comes from the phrase that, it takes a village to raise a child. It started from last year. I started at Arms Wide in April, like right at the beginning of the pandemic, and in working with my recruitment team around some of the things that we wanted to do, visioning what Arms Wide could look like. I shared an article and some information with my recruitment team, and we were primarily talking about how do we increase recruitment for foster and adoptive families. Well, one of the articles was about a program in, I believe it was Seattle, called It Takes a Village. And so Ashley Sims, who is a recruitment and training supervisor, reached out to the person who developed that program and asked him, what did you do? How did you do it? What did it take to do it? And so she came back and she talked to me and she said, I want to do that. We know that there's an issue of African American children being overrepresented in our system. So this is one thing that we can do to address it. And we started building it out, and we're fortunately able to get some funding from a local funder here to hire someone to lead the effort. And it's a multifaceted outreach program that is not just focused on finding families for African American children, but also on focused on supporting kin caregivers.
Yeah.
You know, kinship caregivers do amazing things. You know, they step up. You know, their motivation is different from, you know, our traditional foster and adoptive families who many times do this out of some sense of altruism, but some of our kinship caregivers, they do it because they feel like they got to do it.
Yeah.
You know,
for sure.
and are happy to do it, but don't always have the means to do it, right? So part of the It Takes a Village is around building supports to help those families as well who are caring for children to keep them out of foster care. And finally, to work with civic organizations, with faith-based congregations, with anyone who will work with us to build these villages within communities to help keep children out of foster care, and when they do come into foster care, help them to get out of foster care. So our It Takes a Village launched May 26th with a conversation about disrupting disproportionality. And we're really excited about what's to come. We're in the beginning phases of developing a community councils and finding out where are the resources and how do we navigate and pull them together to create these villages, because it ultimately is not an individual responsibility. It's a community. It's a community concern, and it's going to require community solutions. And so that's the response that we're taking to that.
I hope I'm not going off track here, but I just remember Kyle and I recently watched, you know, we're like, after the COVID stuff, we're like at the end of our what are we going to watch thing. But
run out.
This is a great movie. We watched Dances with Wolves, and just thinking about community and visualizing all of the tribe, remember when Kevin Costner comes and lives with the
I didn't see the movie.
Oh my goodness! Now you
watch
have
a lot
something to
of
watch
movies.
this weekend. Anyway, they all get together when there's a problem in the community.
Yes.
And they say, "What can we do? What are we going to do?" And they smoke the peace pipe and pass it around in the movie. I don't know if that's really what they did. But you know what I'm saying? They're basically saying, we got a problem here.
How do we fix it?
Who's stepping in? And it wasn't a government. Matter of fact, they were wanting to get away from the government. It was their family.
Yeah.
And he became part of the white man in the movie, Kevin Costner, became part of their family.
Wow.
It was a really great movie.
Okay, I'll add that one to my list too.
And so anyway, but that reminds me of that is what it is. It's a village.
It's a village.
And it starts with caring for people. I think awareness precedes change.
Yes, and that's why I'm really passionate about advocacy, because advocacy is really all about education and awareness, and you have to give people information. And people have to be open to accepting that information in order for them to make wise, informed decisions. And I've been an advocate for that for a very long time, which is why when I was doing my graduate studies, I chose political social work as a concentration versus going into therapy work.
Okay.
Because I just feel really passionate about making sure that people have information and are aware of the issues, because if you don't know about something, you can't really do anything about it. A good friend of mine says, when they know better, they do better.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah.
So I want to know better.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to know better because I didn't realize that. Now, maybe because before we became foster parents, I didn't even really realize much about foster care. So we became a foster parent. We got a placement really quick, and we hit the ground running. And we got 2 placements, you know. And so there was a lot. It's a steep learning curve.
It is
for foster parents. I mean, it is challenging, especially when you have kids who are not of the basic level, right?
Right.
Got a lot of trauma. We have a lot of kids who need a lot of support. So this is just an area that you know, you don't have to think but 2 seconds to realize it's true, right? I mean, even when you think about the whole adoption assistance program that we have in Texas, you know, if you're white, you don't get any
Adoption
assistance
assistance.
unless you're 6 years old.
Right.
If you're African American or any other race or what do you
Race or
ethnicity, right? Yeah, you only have to be 2 or a part of a sibling group or whatever. So even that, like, shouts it, right?
Exactly.
That shouts the whole thing. And so, and I don't know if that's the same for every state, but I know it was here. And so I guess what I'm saying is, what do you want people to know? This is an opportunity. Like, what do you want people to know? How can we help? Awareness is key. We have to become aware, and that's what we want to do right now. Make people aware. If you painted the picture of what it would look like for these kids, obviously you've already said one thing. We're gonna try to get to the root. We're gonna try to help families when they first, you know, if I couldn't have afforded to go to therapy myself, I would have quit. I would have quit. And I remember a day going, and, you know, I'm just gonna be real here, but I'm either gonna feel stuck and trapped in my own life for a long time or I'm gonna get help.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I have a supportive husband, I have a supportive family, I had the resources that I could go and I get help, and I still go when I need to. I had a session yesterday, you know, but we don't all have that.
Right.
We don't all give ourselves permission to get that.
Right.
So what could that look like?
Wow.
Let's stick with our disproportionality right here. What because it's the same. It's the same for everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm saying what they need is what we really all need, but there's a problem. So I don't know. You can speak to it. I'm talking a lot. Sorry, I got really excited about that.
That's okay. So, oh gosh, what would I want people to know about the disproportionality and the disparity that it currently exists in our system? Is, first of all, it exists. It's real. And what's happening to the children who end up not being adopted, who don't get to go back to family, who end up aging out of foster care, is that they end up homeless. They end up with untreated mental illness. They end up in jail. And unfortunately, some end up as sex workers, and some end up dying because they don't have the connection to a caring adult. They don't have a place to call home, and they don't have any connections to anyone who is going to be their spotter. I love this new commercial that's out that talks about Simone Biles and how her grandparents stepped in and pulled them out of the foster care system. They spotted her. We don't have enough spotters for kids who are in the system. And so what I want people to know is that being a foster or an adoptive parent may not be for you, but what can you do? You know, can you be a mentor to a child? Can you help a kinship caregiver get some repairs done? You know, are you a carpenter? You know, are you a good cook? Can you help take care of kids when foster parents or kin caregivers need a night out? You know, there are so many things that people can do. Think about what it is that you're good at or what it is you're gifted at, and your ability to be able to help someone by using that gift or that ability, and figure out a way to get involved to do that. And so if there was, I guess, one other thing that I would say is we definitely need more foster and adoptive families. We just do.
Do we need African American foster and adoptive
We need
families?
African American foster and adoptive families. We need foster and adoptive families of all races, but particularly African American foster families. Now, often get into this conversation about African American families and children only being children only being placed with African American families. In my mind, a family is a family. But it's if a non-African American family chooses to adopt a child who's African American, what they need to do is the work. You know, we talked earlier about compassion being key. Compassion is great, love is great, but if you're non-African American caring for an African American child, you got to do the work to figure out what needs to happen for that child to maintain their cultural identity. What is it going to take for them to maintain cultural ties?
What is that? Can you tell us what that would? I mean, give me some ideas.
Oh gosh, it means doing an assessment before you get started. So, if you are considering bringing an African American child or any child who's different from you, what does your community look like? Are they going to be accepting? What about your immediate family and your extended family? Are you going to be able to, is that child going to be accepted as a member of the family when you bring them to outings? What do the schools look like? How diverse are they? You know, is this child going to always be the other? I mean, the only. Are they, in every situation, are they going to be the only one? So do the work of assessing if this is something that you're able to do and something that you're willing to do, and if you're going to have that village of support to do it. Because what can ultimately end up happening is, while you might give a child access to a better quality of life, their emotional and mental well-being may not be cared for in such a great way. And so it's called being intentional and being willing to do the work, engaging in cultural humility, being culturally competent, and just being an advocate and being a voice for that child. So
yeah, that's really good, DeJuana. I'm glad I asked you that question, because that's important.
it is.
Because I have a book, and I found it at a not Trader Joe's. What's that other? World Market.
Okay.
There's a book that talks about being different, and it's like I'll put it in the show notes and send it to you too. It's a children's book.
Okay.
But I liked it. And anyway, that's super important, because it is, you know, even being raised the way I mean, both my parents were white, you know, I didn't have a lot of diversity, you know, growing up, but I still felt alone. I had some developmental and trauma, attachment, divorce, all kinds of, my mom remarried actually by the time I was 2. But I remember walking into the cafeteria, and it wasn't about the color of my skin. This is about being a 7th grader. And looking around 650 people in my class and saying, where am I going to sit? Who wants me? And can you imagine that? That's just, then how about the other? You know, how about you look different?
Yeah.
Right? And that's what this book's about.
Okay.
But that's good. That's very good. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to soak all that in. So, okay, well, is there anything else you would want to share?
Let's see. We need more resources.
Oh, I know. Okay, hold on. Ooh, might have interrupted your thoughts.
That's okay. Go ahead.
You know Amber Knowles, right?
I do. Very well.
So Amber Knowles talks about we don't need more recruitment.
We need more retention.
We need more retention, but she says the way we get retention is through support.
Yes.
So I love that, because it's exactly right. I mean, who doesn't want to be a part of the club that people bring you meals, cut your grass, help you get to therapy, whatever, all these things? Who doesn't want to be a part of that club?
Right.
Sign me up.
Right.
Who wants? Yeah,
that is so critical. You mentioned earlier about being new to foster care and not really knowing what that means. And so I think as child placing agencies, it's our responsibility to help support families, and doing that by figuring out where they are and what they need, not making assumptions that, this training is going to do that or this training is going to do this. Training is great, but lived experience is so much richer. And the support that comes and that can be available once you understand what people need. It's going to be individual, right? We are also individual, and so our needs are going to be, for support, are going to be individual needs for support. And so when people are new to fostering and adopting, they don't know everything that comes along with that. And so it's our
responsibility.
Exactly. And so it's our responsibility as professionals to guide them on that journey, because it is absolutely a journey, and it is absolutely a marathon and not a sprint. But it's our responsibility to help them, meet them where they are, and provide that support. Because if we want to work smart, we want to keep more foster parents by retaining them than creating new foster parents who cycle out of the system in under 2 years. And so, I absolutely agree with that. Retaining foster parents through providing them appropriate support is critical. And part of that support comes through community collaborations. I absolutely love working with Amber. We work together on a lot of different collaborative groups. But creating those collaborative relationships that help support people in their communities, because different communities are going to have different needs. Right. And so understanding what those needs are is important for us to be able to do that work and help foster parents do the work and caregivers do the work of caring for children who've been traumatized by abuse and neglect.
Yeah, that's right. I think, is your grandma still alive?
No, she died in 1987.
Because you know what? She's here with us today, because throughout this whole conversation, we've woven in, you said it again just a minute ago, what does somebody need?
Yeah.
What do they need? What do they need?
What do they need? They are the best persons to let us know what that is. They know, they're the experts on what their needs are. And so we got to listen to them.
And in a way, your grandma was kinship care for you.
Yeah.
Full circle.
She was part of that village,
She was.
If she wasn't available for to take care of me when my mom was trying to work, who knows?
Yeah. Isn't this beautiful?
It is. It really is.
This beautiful circle here. You were made for a mission.
Yes.
And so is your grandma, and so is your mom, and so am I, and so are you. We're all made for a mission.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, DeJuana.
Thank you.
This is a really great conversation. And I hope the takeaway that we have today is listen, listen for what people need, and then respond.
Yeah.
The response is probably a lot easier if we listen.
Got it.
To what we need. Yeah. Thank you, DeJuana. I appreciate it. I hope you were as inspired as I was today, and that it continues, and that you are able to slow down and to calm and to listen and to really hear and see where there's a need, and then respond. Because that's all there is to do, is for us to respond in love and compassion. And so I encourage you to do that. Don't forget to share this with other people. Share this with all the people in your lives, because this isn't just for foster and adoptive parents. This is for humans. We need to be aware of what's going on. And like DeJuana said, there are opportunities for us to help. There are opportunities for us to serve others, even if we choose not to be a foster parent. Kyle and I have people in our lives that love our daughters and that become kind of like grandparents, because they need that. You can't have too many grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles in your life that love on them. And so we have one that in just 2 weeks is going to take our daughter and spend a week with her. And my daughter she gets out my calendar every single day and counts how many days. And that's amazing. And of course, my friend buys her a toy, and she talks about that too. But you can do something. You can do something to help. And so I hope that you find something to do. And the number one thing as a parent is is take care of yourself. If you're a foster parent, take care of yourself. That's a big one for me. So you can't give what you don't have. So like, subscribe, share the podcast, encourage others, and we'll see you next week.
Mama's Way.